Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Neighborhood Conversations. It's a great sunny day in Halifax. We are recording this podcast on the 22nd of December, which is actually close to Christmas. It's actually really good to be in your neighborhood today. Hope you are keeping safe away from all the weather, keeping warm, and hope you find great um, awesomeness and joy in this season of holidays. In this podcast, we try to have conversations that are inclusive to help people and to educate them on how they can connect with community. It's a great privilege that we have the opportunity to talk about community engagement. Community engagement is really important. It brings a connective piece as community leaders, as advocates, as employers. How are you engaging in community? How are you bringing that to another level? Today we have the amazing Joel Murphy, who is an amazing leader himself, who is doing, I would say, no, is doing amazing things in community, lots of passion in research, and so much other more. Joel, welcome to the Neighborhood Conversation. How are you?
Thanks. Good. Thanks, Templeton. Excited to be here and talk about community engagement with you.
Awesome, awesome. Joel, it's so important as we connect with community. Engaging is important, and setting the tone on how you understand community, how you listen to community in order for things to grow. It's really important. So before I want to go into this context of what does community engagement mean to you, and you can take it from any angle you think of from that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when speaking about community engagement, I think you have to start and consider like what community is and community means. And so like my background is in like I'm a researcher, I'm a PhD candidate, and particularly adopting community-based participatory action research approaches and engaged scholarship. So the importance of understanding and meaningfully engaging with community is important part, both in terms of like my professional work and my involvement at the Center for Employment Innovation at St. FX, but also within my doctoral work. And so I think starting with what community is, like that's an important spot or thing to consider. And I think starting with it means that it's really based on the context in which you're working, right? So community means a group of individuals, and that could be as broad as a city or a town, or potentially a particular population within that. If you're an employer, a community could be the neighborhood in which you're located in, or your clients in which you're serving, or if you're providing services for people, community could be those people receiving services or participants within your programs. So I think understanding what community is and what that looks
Right.
like
Hmm.
is an important conversation to have and be able to have clarity up front. But then community engagement, I think, again, from my perspective and the work that I'm involved in, is really about, I think, well, it starts with humility, and it starts with a moving towards and moving in relationship, to be able to understand more, to be able to learn from, and to be able to be with um, individuals and that unit of population that you're interacting with based on whatever you're hoping to do. So from a researcher lens, community engagement could look like what is the research you're doing, and who is it relevant to, and who are you hoping to connect with, and what are the learnings, and what is the knowledge that's being created, and who is that relevant to. For a service provider, I think it could look different. It could be your staff, it could be particular individuals in the community. But I think fundamentally, community engagement to me is a intentional movement towards relationship.
Right.
Um, and in a seeking of understanding of some context. I think that would be the maybe an
Yeah.
overly simplistic consideration, but
Yeah. I love the word intentional. And I feel like that's something that we have to think about, is being intentional and listening, being intentional, and being humble. Like you said, humility has ways, and sometimes humility is hard. When trying to serve people. And I want to ask you this question: like, what community are you coming from today? I think that that's a good resonating
hmm.
question to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting question. I think um, Huh. I have some amazing colleagues that I work
Yeah,
with,
yeah,
who have been really helpful for my learning in this. And I think one of the things that really stood out for me, it was a conversation that I had with one of my colleagues, um, Jocelyn,
yeah.
and she talked
She's
about the
awesome.
idea of like locating yourself and having that like the importance of locating yourself as you're moving into, I would say, anything, into relationship, into community, definitely within a community engagement and understanding. And there's a whole field of like community development, right? Like there are experts who do this, and fields of research and fields of approaches. But for me, like I live in rural Nova Scotia, in the town of Berwick. That's kind of the geographic community that I'm embedded within.
Yeah,
Um, I think that for me, I I I think the idea of social location and understanding like who I am, so understanding
yeah,
the privileges that I have in terms of my background and the family I was born into, and my gender and all these pieces. Like I think understanding that is an important part of how I come into space.
right.
But I think in terms of community, that's I'm coming from a place uh, of Berwick, Nova Scotia.
Yeah,
But I think there's a bigger piece in terms of how we come in. I hadn't thought of, I should have mentioned that, but I think that's an important thing for us to think about when entering into community engagement is
yeah,
understanding who we are, and how, and kind of what we represent as we come into spaces.
How we're showing up is just it's so important. And I always try to say when you're in your community teaches you a lot of things. They show you values, they show you a little bit of standards, but in order to go out into the broader community to help others. And I know that I'm an island boy coming from the Bahamas, and I
Mhm.
always try to say that my values from my community, from Abaco, were entrepreneurship, but also being patient, being respectful, being willing to serve, and also working hard. Working hard was also one of the aspects of my values of community from my community. And that's why I uphold those values when I came abroad to serve other communities, working hard, putting that entrepreneurial mindset in bringing other perspectives. So I merge into this next question of what are the values that you have gotten either from, it can be from community but also from your family tree as well, because that's a community as well. Your family is a community as well. So like what are the values that you bring, and how does it connect with your community engagements, community? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I think, like, obviously, like, even in like my response to the previous question, I think a value that I have, uh, that comes from my family and just from, I think, yeah, is the idea of humility.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think and a critical self reflection. I think there's something around, when we're striving to engage in community, when we want to be involved in social change, when we want to support, um, when we want to like move into that kind of that transformational piece.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, there has to be a sense of humility, and that term of reflexivity. So this idea of critically understanding and thinking about, okay, who am I? What are my experiences? What are the values that I'm coming in? And then how does that then either shape, or how do I need to be aware of that? That's involving in influencing my engagement. I think like I take a strength based perspective. Like I view people as capable.
yeah, yeah,
Full
yeah,
stop. Like there are
yeah.
people have gifts, they have skills, they have the asset based community development is a big piece around this in terms of when entering into community, whatever that context that looks like. What is your personal perspective of that community? Is it,
Right.
oh, I'm coming into this space and they have skills, they have resources, they have all these pieces, or am I coming? I know what to do. Like I
Mm,
and that's the history of research, right? It's
yeah,
extractive. It's I'm
yeah,
the expert, and expert means have read all these books and I have this degree and I know all the answers,
yeah,
um, which I would challenge. I think understanding what quote unquote being an expert means is we all have experiences. We all know our neighborhoods. Like I grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Um, and I grew up in a community in called Wolseley, and like I knew my town, like I knew my little neighborhood within Winnipeg.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important piece. It's connected with this idea of values of like humility and reflexivity, but also this value of like seeing and viewing others as capable. And then, and again, it's a bit dependent on the context in which you're kind of moving into this engagement piece or this type of community engagement. But that's a value, this kind of asset based approach, and saying, I'm coming into this space. Again, I think there has to be clarity. Like that's another value I would say. Like, why are you engaging in community, whatever
Yeah.
the context? Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah, we could talk about that for a while. There's again, my researcher lens is there's just such a uh, there's a horrible history from an academic coming into a space and extracting all like yes, the learn, and then they leave and then it's done. Um, I think that there needs to be a consideration, and that can be true for employers, that can be true for community organizations. Um, I think a value that I would have around community engagement is if you are coming in to a community and seeking their involvement, again, having clarity around what that involvement means, what is the expectations, what is community, whomever that is, what do they want, what's their level of expectation, what's their level of involvement in whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, but then there's accountability. Um,
Oh, that's a
so
big
the
one.
value, right? So the value of like if I'm engaging in this work with you, and I'm sure you've experienced this, right? Like
Right.
if you're moving into like whatever it is, if you're asking people's opinion on something, you need to then be responsive and accountable to do something with said response. I
Yeah.
think like
Yeah.
that, and that's again, that's my value, right? It means more work for the person who's coming in,
Yeah.
but I think that it aligns. I think it's just the right thing to do, full stop.
Right.
But
It is.
also, I think it's a demonstrating of the fact that you view the people that you're interacting with a particular level of respect. Um, and so the idea of accountability, and that's big within like indigenous methodologies. There's so much good learning that we can learn from, again, researcher, so I can pull the other, but like there's so much around accountability to community and who is it for and who, and like, and so I think that's just a big piece to think about and consider. And like a personal value of mine is I don't want it, whether it's professionally or academically or even personally, like if I'm involved in engaging my community in a volunteer capacity, like I want to be genuine in what I'm doing and be
Mhm.
accountable for reaching out to people. So maybe that's just respect as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I totally agree. That's Thank you for that response because, like, it's really important. And one thing that you said that really resonated with me, was seeing people's capability as their passion skill set. Because, like, that I think that that's really important when looking at people in community, is meeting them where they are in order to help them to grow and stuff like that, which is really important because saying that I believe in you, and I always go back to, like I said, going back to my home country. I go to those kids back in my high school, say, hey, you can make it. I believe in you. Knowing that you can build your future from the start. And sometimes the low academic students are discouraged and say, no, like I was there too. But I made it through. I pushed. I succeeded. I didn't listen to people in the background, but I was encouraged by my community. So, like,
Mm.
I feel like that's really important, to set that. Yeah, yeah,
I look forward to my family's security in the future. That's the main goal as a father.
The empowerment from changing careers has really just made me want to get out of bed in the morning.
I'm looking forward to growing my business. So I want to hire people like I was hired. I want to give guys that chance.
Il me fera plaisir de continuer à travailler avec les immigrants francophones en Nouvelle-Écosse.
I am looking forward to the financial freedom that I never had before.
Well, and even building off that, Templeton, it reminds me of something else. Again, one of my coworkers we were talking about doing like engaging young people and like learning about their experience and some of the programs that we were running.
yeah,
And she asked the question, and I think it was just this big kind of like mic drop moment for me about like who is asking the question and how, right? And so I think like even talking about an understanding, um, if you're how you're entering into spaces. Are you the right person to be doing that? Like, what is even
Mm,
your role in community engagement?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
should you be the person in front? Should you be the person supporting? Should you, like, how are you able to bring what you can bring to support the community engagement, to support whatever the intention and purpose is, but understand your role in it? And I
yeah,
think that's a that can be humbling. Again, it's a humbling piece around,
yeah,
like, oh, I shouldn't be the person who's out front around this.
yeah,
Like, it should be somebody else. And it's not out of a sense of like fear on my part. It's out of a sense of like, I respect, like, just the level of respect and understanding and accountability. And I think that that's a thing to think about as well, is, and again, it's that self-awareness, like, who is asking the questions or in doing the engagement, and how are they being asked? And again, it comes around this, like, is it culturally appropriate? Is it
yeah,
responsive? Is it anti-oppressive in practice? Like, all these pieces are important considerations that, like, we're all called to think about really intentionally, particularly because of the history potential of, depending on the work that you're in and the type of things you're doing.
definitely.
That you reminded me of that. I think that's really wise.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. It's really important as we continue to see other things about being comfortable to the ways of accepting, like you said, accepting that, hey, I'm not the right person to do this. And knowing your role and position in community is really important. And don't try to think that you know it all. Get yourself educated, learn from community, because even though you're the expert in the room, that means, but you're still able to learn.
100%. And what is again, it goes back to the concept of expert, like, in
Yeah,
in a research context, right? Like, I can come in as a researcher and have, like, oh, I know this methodology and this, like, philosophical approach, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't, like, but that doesn't make my experience or my understanding any more important than, like, I volunteer, I'm on a board, and for an organization working in the area of, like, youth homelessness or
yeah.
youth experiencing homelessness.
Oh,
And so we're really intentional about engaging with staff in an appropriate way as the board, because, like, sure, I can have, this is our governance model, this is our vision, these are strategic plans, but if it doesn't align and match with the experience of staff, let alone the youth participants within the program whom we're
yeah,
serving, then
yeah,
it's nothing. So understanding,
yeah,
like, yeah, I can come in with this level of understanding of these topics, but that doesn't mean my opinion or what I have to say is any more important.
yeah.
It's actually,
Totally
right. It's a mutual thing. They can both
right.
enhance each other. Um,
Correct. Yeah.
anyways, yeah, I think that's a really
Bringing, yeah, enhancing each other, bringing it all together. I use the word umbutu, which means
mm,
togetherness, of the African proverb of saying that we work together in order to achieve together, and our successes is your successes, and it brings that way of connecting. And sometimes you have to be very comfortable with challenges in order to engage in how to accept differences, and knowing that there will be conflict, and there will be different opinion, and that's how we work together in community. So how can we become more comfortable in being challenged, like, but that brings back to humility as well, humbling yourself in order to be comfortable with it, because you have to humble it in order to listen. And I feel
mm,
like listening is sometimes hard for people to do when trying to um, observe other people's differences, when trying to create community. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I think, yeah. So, like, I think humility is foundational. I think relationship is really important.
yeah,
And again, in relationship it's a tricky term, because you don't want it to be extractive or manipulative or not genuine.
right,
I think that's a big piece, right? Like, if you're seeking to engage your community in whatever role you're in, um, what is the motivation? Like, what is that internal piece, and where is that coming from? And it's about that locating yourself. Like, okay, why am I doing this? So, like, I'm in some of my research, I'm very clear up front saying, like, uh, we want to do this research because we want to learn best practices around this particular way to do things. Like, so you say that, but then you're also in that same breath saying, but we also want to be able to support you in the learnings. And so like these are the commitments that we will make in terms of how we'll go about conducting research, how we'll go about sharing the research, and having that kind of collaborative participatory piece based on people's what they're hoping for and what they want, right? The level, again, what do people want?
Yeah.
So I think it grounded in coming from a place of humility, seeking relationship first. I think particularly if you're wanting to have lasting impact within a community, whatever that community is, it the idea of it just being like a drop is pretty like, oh, I'm in and I'm out, right? Like here I am,
Yeah.
I'm gone. Is pretty. It feels extractive and it doesn't feel genuine.
Right.
Um, Particularly, like I work with a fair amount of young people, and like young people, like they can, right? You know this, like they can
Yeah.
tell, right? If you're not
Yeah.
genuine and you're not like, and you're like
They'll be
coming in like,
honest.
and they'll call it out and they'll say, no, I'm not doing it, and
Yeah.
rightfully so.
Yeah. I don't blame them. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So I
Yeah.
think in terms of like navigating that humility, acknowledging when you're wrong.
Yes.
Like I think that's like I've done that. Said like, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that's a blind spot for me,
Right.
or that was dumb. Like what I
Yeah.
said was dumb.
Yeah.
And then like seeking forgiveness and hopefully repairing relationship, and then
Yeah.
learning from it. So I think like all the things you said, right, in terms of like humility and mutual understanding the mutual benefit and being clear about what you're offering, and then when there are ruptures or disagreements or different agendas, particularly around community engagement, if you're having multiple stakeholders around a table, like everybody has different funding sources potentially, or different organizational goals or values, and so being able to again walk through that with humility and with relationship and a critical hope, I think is also something that's a personal value. But anyways, that's a little bit
Critical
of
hope is good. You like hoping for change and hoping for things to move forward and stuff like that. Joel, this has been like so like eye opening. It brings a whole different level, and we're gonna bring you back on because I think like the reason why we've been actually through a series of community conversations and how to connect with community more. And April Adams came on and she talks about the diversity of community and the diverse perspective of community from her indigenous lens, but also from a broader perspective. Um, I always try to ask this question, but I put it in a different question format today. What's alive for you in this moment? What are you hopeful for community as we end 2022, moving into 2023? What's alive for you? Yeah, in this moment. Yeah.
Well, like we're a part of a community of practice
Yeah.
that's composed of individuals from across Nova Scotia who are working within the youth, with it working directly with young people in the career development field.
Yeah.
And so like you and I get to do that together, and that's been a
Yeah.
lovely over the last year and a bit.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that we met our final meeting, or our final online gathering was yesterday for the year 2022. And I think the thing that I don't know if you experienced it or not, but like that community has been coming. That's a level of community engagement. Like it
Right.
grew out of like
Mhm.
our mutual, like, this is really good. Like, let's get
Yeah.
together with people.
Yeah.
And we had a cohort of people like, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that's starting to happen in that group, because we've been together for a little over a year, because people are choosing in, because there's relationships being built, there's trust being built, like a classic saying within the Center for Employment Innovation, and it comes from somebody, so I don't know exactly who it was, but like relationship moves at the speed of trust. So this
Yeah.
idea of, right, like I should really know who it is. Somebody said it. But it's this idea of like relationship being foundational for, I think, a lot of true societal transformation.
Right.
But I think what's happened in that group of people is that there's been a trust begin to build. And we're starting to be able to, and we're learning directly from young people about their experiences. And I think the thing that I'm hopeful about is that there are opportunities for people to work together across systems. And I think we're beginning to see that. And again, like my lens, like looking at career development and the workforce development as a whole, but like, I think that there's lots of opportunities for people to be able to understand that the way that things have been done in the past can be better. that we can
Yeah.
enhance things. The value, there's an author called Gabor Mate, and he talks about, I went to a talk, or I went to one of his talks, he was talking about his most recent book, and he was talking about the value of disillusionment, which I think is something that fills me with hope because,
Yeah.
and he was talking in the context, he's a physician out in Vancouver, and he's really big about trauma-informed practice, and like it has this whole, it's beautiful. So he was talking about the value of disillusionment for medical students when they're looking at the medical system and saying there are things we can do better. Like how can we have a trauma-informed perspective in our healthcare delivery, in the judiciary system, in the education system, all these people, all these
Right.
big systems.
Yeah.
So this idea of the thing that I'm hopeful about is that you can have that you can be disillusioned with systems,
Yeah.
with organizations that you're working for, but there's opportunities. If there's a group of people come together, you can start to shift those systems.
Yes.
And again, this idea of community engagement, it has to be done in community, especially when there's like equity seeking communities and they haven't have a spot at the table, creating spaces and then getting out of the way or being part of it. Like that's exciting because then you can start to see those systems transformation happen.
Yeah.
And I think it has to start with that idea of this disillusionment of, oh, this something's not quite right here. And I think we're starting to, in the career development field, I think, especially in Nova Scotia, like there's some really exciting things happening.
Yeah.
And so like, it's exciting to be able to think about, oh, wow, like if we have, based on this, like we have a community practice of people who are, they're building relationship, they're trusting, we're having really honest conversations about how we can support young people better. What could that mean? Right. So I think there's this idea of when you're able to engage with people in relationship and trust with honesty and accountability, that they can then lead to these bigger system change pieces.
Yeah.
And that fires me up.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit naive. I'll admit that. I'm young enough and I'm arrogant enough to think that it can happen, but it's fun to be able to work with people like yourself and Andrew and other folks to be able to think about, let's do this in partnership. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but the opportunity
No,
yeah.
I love it. I feel like that's really awesome and that's really connecting of how we move forward in this life, and it brings us to a different perspective in that way. And so Joel, thank you so much. I mean like it's really good that we have you in this way of sharing. You're a great friend. I think that I value things that you say and how we've connected these past few years. I feel like we've known each other from Hardwood. We sat on a board together, and so like knowing the getting to know you from a different perspective and lens. We're definitely bringing you back on next year. I feel like we need a part two of this, but from a different context of theory based, because you know there's a lot of theory action based, and we can like literally. I know you're excited when it comes down to theory based work, and so like would love to bring you back on in that perspective as well. But until then, it's a pleasure to have you. Hope you have a great holiday,
Mhm.
and hope that there's new possibilities and great work that you're going to be doing in 2023. And I look forward to doing that with you as well. Um, as you continue to move forward, there's a saying. There's a book that I have, and I'm gonna actually grab it. It's in my backpack really quickly. uh, when you are trying to move forward, communities around the world are entering a new era of community building, whether improving economic conditions or reducing poverty, re-energizing citizens and social programs, reducing crime. They are engaging people from all sectors as never before to work together as equals to improve their quality of life. And this is actually a community conversation book. And so it's actually by Paul Bourne from Tamarack. And
Oh,
it's really good. It brings another perspective of how we can continue to build. I haven't read read the book. I haven't finished reading the book as yet, but I'm going to bring this book into perspective. So if you are looking for a good read,
thank
Community Engagements, Community Conversations by second edition by Paul Bourne. It's a really good book. Yeah.
and I will slip it in here. Like
Yeah.
I love that. Like Paulo
Yeah.
Freire, who's an educational philosopher, originally from South American. Like he was really kind of the the grandfather of critical theory as a whole. But one
Yeah.
of the things he talks about is praxis and this idea of reflection and action. They go together. And I think when you think about what we're talking about, this idea of systems change, engagement, a lot of people take action but then they don't reflect, or people like reflect and then they don't take action. So I
Right.
think it has to be his whole thing was like it's a both and I
Yeah.
think what you're talking about is, let's think like that's where theories are really useful, but
Yeah.
it's useless without like application to the communities you're involved in, to changing pieces and to being open to what that means. So I think I love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds
Yeah.
awesome.
This is so good. This is so good. This is so good. Oh my gosh. This has been a good conversation. It's a pleasure, everyone, listening audience, to be in your neighborhood. And we hope that you were inspired today on how you can engage with community more and use your values to present yourself, and being also humbling yourself, and also being able to listen in order to serve. We at the Neighborhood Conversations, we bring a lot of unique conversations and unique topics. And today is one of the special ones that we get to do with Joel. So until then, have a great rest of your day, your morning, whatever time you're going to listen to this episode to. Have a good one, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you, Templeton.
This podcast is funded by the government of Nova Scotia.